Right, welcome back to the All Out NRL Fantasy Podcast, episode 4 of our preseason, Mick. Welcome back to the show, mate, after missing last week due to a vicious hangover.
No, I wasn't hungover. I was just sick. Yeah, look, last podcast was great. Our numbers have been great.
Oh, mate, the numbers have been fantastic.
And still, it feels close. We're still a decent way away from the NRL season.
We're less than a month. I mean, trials obviously start this weekend, and we'll go through a little bit of a TLT chat. I know we didn't post anything yesterday for TLT, but, you know, sometimes life calls, and we got to do what life brings you.
We'll also be missing Dor, who's in America.
Dor.
He's going to see the GOAT.
If you're going to miss Dor, it's going to be 2.5 weeks without Dor on the podcast. So he's going to be coming back ready, refreshed for the NRL season, that's for sure.
As soon as he found out about Doncic, he bought tickets. No, he didn't. He had it for a while.
The Doncic. Yeah, thanks again for everyone who's supporting us on the YouTube. The YouTube numbers have been elite. I will say the Instagram numbers are going well as well. So close to 30K. So if you know your mate, he's into NRL Fantasy, make sure to follow.
Of course.
It's going to be a big year for 2025 for us, and we're coming for that number 1 spot, which Ben said last week. But bit of breaking news, mate. We like some breaking news on this podcast. There's some NRL fantasy changes this year for 2025, which might, I don't say they'll affect you that badly, but there is a few changes.
Yep.
And
what are they?
As you know, mate, the buy rounds come around 13, 16, 19 this year. For NRL fantasy, you can only fit 13 players for those buy rounds. So the people that are in your starting 13, that's the people who count. So your bench 4, and of course your 4 emergencies won't count. This year, rounds 14, 17, and 20 will also only be that 13 players.
Yes. Yeah, it's an interesting change. I think it probably benefits the casual player more.
Yeah, it does.
Because it is frustrating, I'm sure, when it gets to those rounds and you only got 13 players available, you got injuries as well, people resting. So it's good for them. I'm not so sure I like it personally because obviously we're pretty nuffy about our fantasy. If you're working towards that round, we're not really given an advantage there. So
yeah, it's going to be interesting. It'll be interesting. It'll probably tighten up the pack more. It sort of gets to that period where people start to plan about buy rounds and the good players are thinking well ahead.
Yeah, it's a bit less strategy now.
There's a bit less strategy, I agree. But yeah, just reiterating that. So the round 13, 16, 19 buy, you only field the 13 players. Now as well, rounds 14, 17, and 20 will only be 13 players. So there's 6 rounds that you'll only need 13 players for.
Yeah, I think Supercoach sort of does a similar thing.
Yeah. And it'll probably save a few more trades down the end of the year as well. So you won't be able to trade in or out as much people as you would in those rounds, I guess.
Yeah, it's definitely fair because around those origin periods, you simply don't know who's going to back up.
Yep.
So if you have a lot of origin players in your team, you're cooked.
Yeah, exactly right. And you sort of get to that point in the season where your origin players do sort of matter, and your Nathan Clearys of the world that you got in your team since round 1.
It's not necessarily a strategy if you don't get those origin players because it's basically all luck.
Yeah.
If they get injured in that game or not.
Exactly right. So yeah, a bit of breaking news there for the NRL fantasy world. Moving on though, TLT did drop for the first one of 2025. We sort of do claim it as a TLT, but it's not like you don't get hyped or it's not the same feeling, is it?
It's not the same.
It's not.
Preseason's great, obviously, but
it's good to have footy back.
I'm already thinking about that first TLT.
Yeah, that first TLT for the Vegas games, and there's 2 big names in that first game. Or might be the second game, Cleary and Hines. Do you go with both of them? We'll discuss that a bit later. But TLT, a few interesting ones here for the Sharks and Wars for the first game on Friday, 6:30 p.m. Look, I look down this Wars list and I think this could well be their starting side for round 1. And there's a few players here that I like to point out. Mitch Barnett gets the starting gig with a bench that, he could play 70, 75 plus minutes here.
Yeah, look, last year was a bit of a breakout season for Barnett. He was excellent. His price range sort of equates to what he did last year.
Yeah.
Someone's got to step up in that pack. Obviously, Fisher Harris would be great, but I think he could do what he did last year.
And more. And he's obviously dual position here on fantasy, mid-edge, 712K. If you don't want to go paying halves a bit extra, I think Barnett's going to be a pretty good option this year.
Yeah, he will be. I'm also looking at big Aaron Clarkey.
Ooh, big Aaron Clarkey.
He's been mentioned before on the podcast, as we've said.
Look, if you're a fan, you know that one guy who came on the podcast. And
PPM Beast, apparently.
PPM Beast, who said Aaron Clark was a pod when he was at the Titans.
You can only do so much with 30 minutes of game time.
You know what? It's not a bad shout.
If he plays 50 minutes, I think he's getting your 40s.
That's price.
Is it worth it?
Well, let's have a look at his price, 482K. So he is probably on that higher end of, I wouldn't say cheapy, but he's a lower end, mid-range, high-end cheapy.
It's an awful price.
It's an awful price. We hate it. We hate that price range. I reckon if Kobe Hetherington starts, you're more inclined to go him, who's 414K for the Broncos.
I'm avoiding probably both.
Yeah.
You never know.
Look, Ben said on the podcast the other day, what's a trapezoid? A trapezoid is a trap. Is Kobe Hetherington a chap? And I know we're going off the bit here a bit, but I think he could be. I think he's a trap.
I tend to agree. Look, what's the worst that happens? He absolutely eats to start off with. I'll just get him in.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a simple game.
Another guy who's starting here on the edge for the Wars, and off the top of my dome, I can't think anyone who else is going to come and take his spot in the second row is Jacob Latham. He's 284K currently. He got averaged 21.3, had a bit of a stint for the Wires last year. Could be another cheapie that's sort of surfacing here for the NRL Fantasy faithful. Thoughts on him maybe?
Yeah, Latham, I'm thinking about, he's having a bit of a mind blank. He used to play for the Dragons. Back rower.
Eisenhuth?
Not the Hooth. We'll come back to it. It could be an option. Obviously, you should take a lot from these team lists, but at the end of the day,
it doesn't
that
really
last
matter.
team list is what matters.
Yeah.
And you can see how they go. If they go well, it gives you a bit of an idea if they're going to be picked again. But yeah, it's wait and see.
I'm going to be watching him very closely on the weekend because at that price, edge, 80 minutes, I'd say probably with that bench, he could be a good option. The back line sort of speaks for itself there. No SJ, obviously, this year for the Wars. So we do see.
Just going to mention Jetty Cleary in the reserves.
Yeah.
It's good to see.
Good to see.
He could be one of the all-time greats. He replicates his brother.
I know. For the Sharkies, they made obviously RTS is on the bench. Sorry, he's on the wing for the Wires. He started in the centres last year. Everyone picked him up at an awkward price again. Probably an avoid.
I'm not a fan.
Yeah, probably an avoid. Sharkies, there's really not much to talk about. Really, they're very underdone. They're not picking their side that they would for round one.
Yeah, you got a few guys in there like Atko's starting, Iro's playing.
Will Kennedy's playing, Sione Katoa. So there are a few starters there that will be in round one that are playing.
Yeah, I'm very interested to see how AFB goes from the Sharks.
Yeah.
He hasn't been named, but he's probably the one that for the Sharks, you sort of don't know what he's going to do.
Yeah.
Like he's going to be great, obviously, but we'd love to see the minutes maybe improve from last year.
Yeah, it's a good shout. Dor said last week on the podcast he was a bit worried about AFB minutes because the Sharkies do like that prop rotation.
Yeah.
And I reckon if I was a betting man, I'd say 55 minutes, and that's it for AFB.
There's two ways of looking at it. They got that prop bench, but also AFB is sort of their most important forward. So are they going to, make sure he plays his 60?
Yep.
Maybe drop one of those benches just into the reserves.
Yep. Panthers Raiders is the only other game this weekend, I believe, unless I'm wrong in saying that, but I believe that's the only last game. For the Panthers, they're not going to play their full strength side for clear reasons, but there is a few good cheapies that could force their way in. Obviously, Jerome Luai is gone to the Tigers, so that gives an opportunity for Jake Cole or Brad Schneider. We don't know who's going to fill that 6 jersey.
You'd assume that Blaze Salagi gets that number 6 role.
Yep.
But I have seen some reports that it may not be completely set.
Okay.
You'd assume he is. He's an absolute gun. Maybe some defensive questions. But again, I don't think Schneider and Cole get that spot.
No.
Surely not.
IPAP has been named at edge back rower, which is good to see. I think he's a buy.
His Eels form was some of the best edge row form we've ever seen.
He was a 60-plus point player. And if you're new to fantasy, he got 60 every week. He's in a good team. He's got Cleary on his outside bum.
He went from a grand final team to one of the worst teams ever.
In history. History of competition.
Let's just assume his fantasy points go up at least 10.
Yep, agreed. Buy for the Raiders. Look, I'm looking down this list and you know what, Ricky Stewart could do anything with this team this year, and it's sort of a common theme for us to not buy any Raiders players because we just don't know what Ricky Stewart's going to do.
Yeah, he's very frustrating, coach.
I'm looking down that list and I'm seeing no one that's really standing out at all.
I think the Raiders might get the spoon this year. I said that last year, but Fogarty was a great inclusion. He sort of lifted them above their what their lineup suggests.
Yep.
I can't really think of a Raiders player who I'm really hot on this year.
No.
Tarpany's going to be right.
I like
Hosking maybe.
Hosking could be a good pod if he's playing 80. If he's playing 80, he won't be a pod because he's just that awkward 500K price range, which everyone must jump on.
Yeah.
Corey Horsburgh, we talked about him a little bit. Can he replicate his form from 2 years ago? We'll wait and see what the team list is, but
Like
it's
the
waiting.
Horse is one where you're like, if you see consistent minutes, I just want him in my team.
Yeah, I want that fiery redhead.
He's a machine. And he
Give
was
me
a couple
that
of years
redhead.
ago.
Yeah. That's TLT basically done, mate. There's not really much there to go off. What we had else for this podcast, though, is a quick installment of basically who would you rather? Big who would you rather guy. So
That's our conversations mostly. What would you rather?
So that's one thing that we'll do here. Then we'll do a quick pod segment. Who are the pods that we do like? And then we'll wrap up this video. Next video is going to be us basically creating a team. So make sure to stand by, subscribe for that, like the video, do all that stuff.
We'll make a team. In a week, we'll probably have to restart because that's what everyone does.
Exactly. But yeah, let's start with a few comparison players, mate. Cleary versus Nico. Now they verse each other in Vegas round 1. It would be a ballsy play from any fantasy coach to pick both of them in the same game here in Vegas.
Yes.
Who would you rather, Cleary or Nico?
Like, ideally both. But if we're going on who would you rather, you have to have Cleary. 880K. It's almost cash cow territory for Nathan Cleary.
Yeah, if you're thinking about last year, they were both 1 million players, so they had that 1 million price packet. Cleary is now 120K less than that, and then Hines is a bit less than that.
Yeah, and I think the fantasy community's caught on. He's in 54% of teams, which is ridiculous. If you don't have him, you're losing the easiest captaincy choice every week. Get him in.
Look, it's a bit risky because remember last year, once the Vegas players have played, they lock out, and then you can go back and change your teams after that Vegas lockout. So it would be a risky play to captain him. But boy, would it pay off going to work on that Monday morning, realizing, I've done a wonder here.
You got ghost points. You got no Luai playing for him now. He's in the best team of all time. Even if he plays bad, he'll still get you 50 points worth of tackles and kick meters.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. Two of the biggest guys in All Out NRL Fantasy. Oh, not All Out NRL Fantasy, but NRL Fantasy.
This is our game.
This is the head-to-head, but the Yao and Haas head-to-head. Injury cloud for Payne Haas. Isaiah Yao, we know what he can do. We know what he can do. Who would you rather?
Give me Isaiah Yao.
Give me the Yao.
Look, every year I feel like, maybe from my perspective, you just sort of forget about him.
Yeah.
You go for the Haases, you go for the real upside players.
64.8 average last year, and we hardly talked about him.
Yeah. Isaiah is an upside guy because he either gets you 65 and then he'll get like you a 90.
Yeah.
And you go, how did you get that? Well, he got 60 tackles, ran 200 meters.
Couple of tackle
breaks. That's all you need. 26% of players own him. And I think that's the right idea.
Yeah, I think fantasy coaches are on board with that one.
Yeah, if Cleary's injured or
What's
something
Haas?
like that,
Haas on?
Yau's the best captaincy choice.
Haas only in 15.2%. So there's some part of me that goes like, you know what, Haas only in 15.2%. Bit of a pod, in my opinion.
Would it be crazy to have Hines, Cleary, Haas, and and just have cheapies?
Probably.
I don't think it would be.
We talked about IPAP in the TLT, but we're comparing him to Johnny Bateman, who makes a move to the Cowboys. We spoke a little bit about him. Who would you rather out of those two? My money is leaning slightly towards IPAP, but we don't know the minutes yet.
Yeah.
It could be, if you had to buy one, because I'd probably be buying both, but if you had to buy one.
Like, you got to have both, but is there question marks about IPAP's 80-minute role?
Probably.
Yeah, I probably do want Bateman then because I feel like he's locked in 80.
He's a good scorer and a good team.
You know what? IPAP, he's on the best team of all time. Like,
you're locking down.
If he gets 70 minutes, I think he'll probably do the same as what Bateman would.
Yep.
I don't think the Cows will be, they'll be hover around the 8, but when you're outside Cleary and you're outside that middle forward pack, he's going to perform well.
Yep. Dor said a few weeks ago that Terrell May was the best buy of NRL Fantasy preseason. I'm going to one-up him here, and I'm going to say Connor Watson could be the best buy of NRL Fantasy preseason if he gets that hooker role. So we're going to compare him with Harry Grant here. Harry Grant, probably your best hooker option at the moment. I can't see myself getting anyone else other than him at the moment. But if Connor Watson gets that hooker dual position, 663K, looks like he might play 80 minutes for the Roosters. I reckon might be the best buy.
Yeah, we did like a top 5 hooker players as a post, and we didn't include Watson because if he's not named as hooker, he won't get that dual position for round 1. But if he does get named at hooker, I think he might just beat Harry Grant, who was a bit disappointing fantasy-wise last year.
He was, but he still averaged 50. So
exactly.
We sort of expected that 60-plus range from Grant.
It'll be those two. I think they'll be the top echelon guys. Maybe below that, maybe your Reed Marnies, your Robsons.
Yeah. This next one is really interesting on as well. Rounding out the comparisons, or is there two more? There's two more. Who do you go? So Iongi's going to be one of your wing fullbacks. Who do you go out of Latrell, Teddy, Ponga, or Turbo? So it's a 4-way comparison here. Yeah, if you had to pick one.
That's a tough question. Latrell, I think, is in for a huge year, but 800K is pretty exy.
Yep. He's obviously playing round 1 now as well.
Yeah.
Got that game off.
That is big. Is Trelly fit? I think he is. I might go Latrell for the upside. I think the Rabbitohs are going to be fantastic this year because of one guy, Wayne Bennett. Teddy, getting up in his age. He was great last year, but who are his halves now?
Yeah.
Chatty Townsend, Sanders Smith.
True.
He'll get a lot of usage, but that's probably going to be less points for the Roosters as a whole. Ponga and Turbo, excellent, but I feel like they start the year a bit lukewarm. Just go Latrell.
It's a great question. Ponga obviously has that real big.
They're all upside guys.
Yeah, all upside guys. A lot of attacking stats that are probably needed for Ponga to excel. Turbo, he gets it when he's involved, and he's just got to be involved.
Yeah.
So
Turbo back end was great.
It's actually a tough one. I think Latrell might actually have to be the player as well.
Yeah. I think like as long as Latrell's consistently involved throughout the game, he's going to average the most out of all those guys by a mile.
Yeah. Last comparison for the pod is Fisher Harris versus May. Pretty easy one, in my opinion.
Yeah, May. I think he might be he might be the highest average fantasy guy, like forward.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, big one. To finish the pod, mates, quick one, really an updated pod. Not an updated one, but a refresh pod for everyone thinking of the ideas that you want to go with for the upcoming season. Any traps, pods that you like, that you've seen at the top of your head that fantasy players might want? Because we do like a pod on the podcast.
In terms of traps, like David Fafita's in a lot of teams. I'm not sure why. Because he's going to be injured to start the year.
Is he? He's in 1.8%.
1.8%. Who was I thinking of?
I reckon David Fafita's a good pod.
But he'll be injured. Appy Coruscant as well is in 8% as a hooker. He's suspended round 1.
Yep.
So that's a bit of a trap. Damien Cook, not sure if he's going to play 80. I probably wouldn't go him.
Good trap.
Angus Crichton, I know he's going to be great, but I'm a bit concerned about the Roosters and those halves pairing.
Yeah.
Because he's not outside Walker anymore. I probably wouldn't go Gus Bus if I was going for an edge.
Yep.
In terms of a pod, I'm going Jermaine Hopgood. 1.8%.
Oh. Jermaine.
Yeah, he does have that injury tag on him. I think he should be right.
Yeah. If you can bring that form of 2 years ago, then wow.
Like he should be at lock. I think he had a few little niggling injuries last year that sort of affected his minutes here and there. I think he'll be great again.
Yeah,
and he's only in 1.8% of teams. Look, mid-edge duel, which is very handy.
Yep.
I think Jermaine Hopgood. And the Eels, hop take, I think they'll comfortably make the 8. Under a new coach, Lomax in. Yeah.
Is
that a hot take? They were nearly the spoon last year.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Well, you think the Titans will make the 8?
I think the Titans make the 8. Yeah. I think the Titans make the 8. That's a very hot take.
I'm not sure what you're going off there.
That's a very hot take. Oh, I just think they have a really good team.
They have arguably the most talented spine.
If you go from 1 to 13, their team is actually elite.
It is good.
It is good.
Do they get Carter Gordon in there anyway?
No.
Yeah, no, I think he misses out.
Yeah, no.
I'm trying to think of another pod. Like Corey Horsburgh, Ben stole it from me last week.
Yeah.
Um,
My pod, and I know that I said that I wouldn't go anyone else than Harry Grant, but my pod is JMK. 590K, 1% of teams at the moment. He gets through 80 minutes of work.
I can't see him having a year where it's just breaks through and averages 10 more than what he did last year.
But for an 80-minute hooker, 590K, he gets through a lot of work.
You know who's always solid? Jacob Preston. He had a great year last year. Back end was great. 2.7% of teams. I feel like the best pod's always in your edge.
Yeah.
Edge or middles.
Yeah, big time. We might wrap it up there, mate. Remember, next podcast, we're creating a team, so make sure to subscribe, like that one. Also, a lot of stuff coming for the Instagram. We're only like 26 days out from the NRL, so
yeah, make sure to join the league. It's comfortably
comfortably in front
of the open leagues, but
1,562 people at the moment. I'll tell you what the next one has. And
is it 3 times more?
Without bragging, it's 618, so it's a bit more.
Yeah,
it's a bit more.
I think that meme where you put the code at the bottom helped. Just a fantasy meme.
Make sure to subscribe, and we'll see you for next podcast where we create our own team. It'll probably be pretty dog, but we'll see how we go.
Oh, it's just building, yeah.
It's all morale. It's all morale. We'll see you there.